language related. Next to Tiffany in the Smashing Glasses is Kyle Roderick, who is the author of Bejeweled, which is one of the first books on ethical and responsible jewelry, but also, and specifically for the purposes of this panel, she is, I'm not sure what we say, the word curator is overused, and author. She's both the initiator and the moderator of the community that is Bijoux Review, which is online and is both an Instagram, if you will, site for posting, but also she does live streams, etc. And it's a very important place to go, so I encourage you to do that. And also she's a journalist writes for Forbes and many other publications. Next to her is Raluca Anghel, and Raluca is with the Natural Diamond Council and brings a particular expertise with regard to European law having to do with, and terminology involving, if you will, greenwashing issues. And so we're delighted to have her with us as well. So this is the group. And what our remit is basically to ground this in principally the social media platform that is the largest vehicle for the material we're going to be talking about is Instagram. And then there's like TikTok, which some people use for these purposes, but Instagram is the primary focus, I think. And I'm just giving you this because some of you may not know, some of you may be on social media all day long. And then with intellectual property, really we're looking at the realm of jewelry. And one of the things to remember is that there is both the way something looks, design, if you will, but then there's the way something works, whether it's the watch mechanism or what have you. And then there are the things that serve as brand identifiers, which can also be viewed as intellectual property, and so there's a great effort to protect them. So having done that little bit of introduction, we're going to have 4 sort of foci for the conversation. And my first question is for Marco and for Tiffany. What are the main legal risks in the case of false or misleading statements that are made, if you will, while promoting a product?
First of all, thank you very much. I really wish to thank you, CIBJO, and the organizing for inviting me to this very interesting conversation. It's not often that as a lawyer you can actually speak with people engaged in the real business, and this is very interesting, and thank you again. So the idea of a social platform, Instagram in particular, is a particularly appealing way to promote a business, even in the jewelry business, in the jewelry industry. But it has begun as a kind of a regulated area. It has become clear that there are several and very significant legal risks in doing that the wrong way. If you follow the Italian landscape, there have been very prominent cases recently, but they have not been the only cases. We have had, like in France, for example, a legislation that regulate influencers, and there have been cases like sanctions against fashion models, Nabila, that was sanctioned for unfair commercial practices. And this is the first and main problem. Communication on social media must be done responsibly, because doing it the wrong way could lead to significant sanctions that have been and there has been like the idea that there is a particular focus and attention by a competition authority or communication authorities. If you follow the Italian landscape, you have for sure heard about the Ferragni case, but there has been the Nabila case in France. But outside the business of fashion, there have been several cases that sanctioned a company that had wrong ratings on a social platform. And the sanctions can be huge and can be widespread, because one of the most appealing aspects of Instagram and other social platforms is the easy reach. You can reach basically the entire globe, but you also reach the entire wide range of communication and competition authorities. So those who want to promote themselves on the social platform, they must build an awareness and must be very careful, because sanction can be very, very important and on two aspects, public enforcement, but also, if any, consumers' private enforcement.
Do you want to add to that?
Sure. I think you make some great points about the cross-cultural, cross-country reach of social media. Unlike, I guess, the old days, if you were taking out a print ad or something in different countries, you know exactly who you're communicating to. But now it's everyone, and you're sort of caught up in whatever is the most harsh enforcements. Thinking specifically about the U.S. market, we have the Federal Trade Commission, which always has an eye on protecting the U.S. consumer. And when they're doing that, they're thinking about what is the average person out there who's maybe a bit distracted, looking at more than one screen at a time, of sort of average intelligence. How are they understanding what you're communicating to them? And are you being deceptive to them in any way, shape, or form? And what they're thinking about is not would the majority of people see this as deceptive, but would 11% or more of the people of average intelligence see this as deceptive or misleading or not being able to understand it. So that's sort of the overarching standard for all advertising in the US that the FTC looks at. They're particularly interested in industries which are complicated and expensive, and we check both those boxes in jewelry, so we sort of have an even higher standard when we're thinking about how we show up on social media and advertising. And I would also mention that this is an ever-shifting landscape. So, of course, social media now, it's been around for a while, but we've seen action from the FTC just in the last year where they've widened the scope of what an endorsement or an influencer is. So now we're saying an endorsement could be if you have, maybe any of us in this room, if you have credibility in your industry and you're tagging a product in a post, boom, you're an endorser, you're an influencer. So it doesn't even mean that maybe you have a contract and you're what we think of as a social media, influencer living in a house somewhere in LA, making content. It can be, it's quite becoming a broader and broader reach of what these things even mean. And then likewise, the enforcement is also ratcheting up. So now in the last year, we've seen the FTC come out and talk about fake reviews, where if you're starring reviews and you're sort of favoring them more or less in your algorithm of how your page is showing up, as well as if you are found to be in violation, not only is the influencer who you've hired subject to those fines are definitely going to claw back to you as the product owner and advertiser, as well as any brokers in between, PR agencies, influencer brokers, et cetera. And you're looking at $50,000 per violation, which if you're churning out a lot of content, that can add up quite quickly. So those are sort of the top line things from the US perspective.
One of the reasons that we're focusing on this is because the obvious remedy is the courts, but for many reasons, that may be inexpensive, ineffective, impossible, something you want to supplement. I don't want to suggest by this panel that we're ignoring the legal system, far from it. But the idea being, and I would ask this question of Kyle and Marco. What are given that caveat and given the attention being paid to social media by regulators, what kinds of remedies can people whose intellectual property is, if you will, being violated take other than the courts? So how, in terms of social media, for example, what can they do? And
I'll take this
for
one.
both. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
sure. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for even having this conversation, and thank you, CIBJO. I'm here because I'm an evidence-based jewelry journalist. I've never thought of myself as an influencer. I've never told anybody I'm an influencer. What I do is I report on all types of jewelry, but with a special interest on sustainable jewelry, and also with a special interest on defending the design copyright of different designers and brands. So what you can do is, in my case, I've followed the jewelry market. I'll see somebody, there's a very famous case, Daniela Villegas, a Los Angeles-based designer, brought out some pieces on a pair of earrings they were sold on Net-a-Porter in 2015. They were one-of-a-kind, very valuable colored gemstone earrings, right? They sold for like 19,000 euros on Net-a-Porter. And then 4 years later, they showed up on, or they didn't show up, but 4 years later, a very similar looking pair of earrings was sold on the Home Shopping Network website. Well, I just posted the photos side by side to say, and then I wrote down the facts. These were designed by so-and-so. They were sold on Net-a-Porter for 19,000 euros. Here we are 4 years later. Do you see any similarity between these two designs? Well, there was a tsunami of comments from people. Many of the people who follow me are designers, independent designers, but also bigger brands, and they, on their own volition, started tagging and spreading this and sharing it on social media. It went to thousands of people, and 32 hours later, those earrings were off the website. They had been removed from Home Shopping Network. So my point is that people like me who are more jewelry journalists, they can use social media, but specifically Instagram, to shape legal remedies without a lawyer. No offense.
Exactly, and we'll come back to Kyle's examples at the end, because we do have some to show you. So, is there something you'd like to add to that?
I think I mean, communication on social media is fast, so that is definitely more effective. But again, I mean, it seems I sound like a lawyer because I always say, okay, you have to do it. You have to do it carefully, even as a journalist, because it's easy to get like those who receive those comments don't like them, and therefore they will react. So that is something to bear in mind.
Okay, so Raluca, what are the obligations that this, and I'm going to use it in quotations, influencer, any influencer, what are the obligations that he, she, or the entity has with regard to disclosing and any connections that they might have to either the product or another entity that has a vested interest?
Firstly, I'd like to say just a couple of words about the Natural Diamond Council for the ones of you that don't know it. It is the largest organization that communicates directly with consumers. We do category marketing for diamonds. And with evolution of technology, the global world, we definitely changed our presence from just advertising, that to Tiffany's point, you would have some ads placed here and there, or an advertising campaign, maybe biannually if you have a great year. We moved to communication 365 days a year with consumers. We have over 100 million unique visitors to our social media platforms, and we have 6.6 million impressions every day. This is huge. So we basically do this for the entire category for diamonds, but we also are here to support industry, retailers, jewelers who would also like to learn a lot from all the know-how that we've gathered all of these years, and we support them in the communication activities that we have towards consumers. The reason for which I'm saying that is that one of the key elements through which we manage to communicate effectively via social media is definitely by sharing a lot of the know-how with other organizations or other individuals who like or do not like to call themselves influencers. And we have seen, of course, increased uptake into even what others would consider the most serious topics. So we launched last year a report called Diamond Facts, where we've been addressing a lot of myths and misconceptions around the diamond jewelry industry. And we, of course, also created our own social media campaigns and communication campaigns. And we also started collaborating with influencers and contributors.
Right, but can I take you back to the question, which
Yes.
is,
So for
what
those
obligations for disclosure does the influencer have with regard to their company, the product? What are the obligations for disclosure? Because clearly you've just announced, for example, a very clear, I mean, I happen to be a big fan of the National Diamond Council, but there's a very clear vested interest. So what are the obligations of the person who's writing and posting?
Absolutely. And for us, doing this the right way was the most important thing. So for all of the influencers and collaborators that we've had for this campaign, absolutely all of them had to communicate on their social media, whether it's through hashtags, through the post itself, that this is, one, a paid partnership, two, this is an ad, or even to name the organization that they've partnered with. Another element that honestly, and Tiffany will know this very well, and same as Marco from legislation, some markets do require that you actually also add in the sources, some others don't. We encouraged all of the influencers to actually include the resource that they've used to make that post. And that's because we consider that everything that they would need to stand for needs to be backed up by data. So that was, let's say, a request that we had from them, and it's not necessarily a link back into us, but actually also getting them in the framework of being transparent with the sources of the information that they're putting out there. So hashtags, clear posts, clear messages, and clear sources are some of the obligations that influencers should commit to.
So you're a champion of transparency, if you will.
Absolutely.
And so Kyle, on the other side, if you will, and Marco as well, what should a company include if, for example, they have a contract with someone we will put in quotation marks as an influencer, so whatever category they are, what should be in that contract?
So this is referring to a post from a brand or a designer?
If, for example, you are working, if you will, for a quote brand, let's say that.
Well, then I would put in a hashtag ad. You can also, there's the banner of paid partnership that you can put in, you can type that in at the top of the post when you're posting the post.
Well, let me be really direct.
Yeah.
Okay, so I come to you.
Yeah.
And say I have a new substance that I think is, sustainable and spectacular, and I would like you to be its advocate.
Ooh.
What should be, yes, I know, I'm giving you the dream assignment here. What should be in the contract that we create if you are going to take on the assignment, if you will, of championing?
Well, here's the interesting thing. I mean, I wouldn't even sign the contract until I asked them a whole battery of questions. There is such a thing as third-party certification standards that exist for, let's say, lab-grown diamonds. In the case of, some of these things, at least there's SCS 007 has it's a global standard certification, so in other words, I would look for things like that. I would look for, watch and jewelry initiative things, or obviously,
Right, but
I couldn't even sign the contract until I probably spent, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 hours making sure that they're.
My question isn't about your due diligence.
What should be in their contract?
Yeah, what should be in their contract?
Oh, they should say that, like, you're not, that me or the journalist or the influencer or the hired brand advocate has no legal is protected from any legal fallout if they're repeating or using language from the brand itself.
Okay.
No, I mean that I would be, is the word correct word indemnified? Is that, or protected? You can't do that? Because the thing is, no, but here's the thing. You should try. No, but the reason why I say that, though, is because I have literally had brands tell me things, and then I do the research, and I find out that they have misrepresented, they have used misleading language, deceptive language, and in fact, they're not telling the truth.
So then, what do you feel as someone who effectively, this is not part of the script, guys, but so then what do you then do as someone who, on the one hand, has, we'll call it journalistic integrity, and on the other hand, has a signed contract? How do you navigate that situation, or how would you?
I don't know, call Tiffany Stevens?
She's on vacation. I know.
She doesn't go. We don't give her this
I
option.
was trying to get.
Well, the
get her
other
to
thing
take
too
this-
is that I have a lawyer who looks at things before I sign anything. I just don't. So,
If I can just add
Yeah,
to that one. So
please,
for example,
go.
because this due diligence on both sides is really, really important.
Yes.
And then there is so much information out there. How do you know which is the verified one? So always go to absolutely assured, verified information. You mentioned standards. There is a global organization that actually certifies the standards called ISIL. So look whether a standard does have or is part of ISIL, because that's the standard that is accredited, recognized, and you definitely have the entire third-party verification process. Not all of them do. So,
Right,
but that's
right.
super extra detailed
and
work
spell
which
out,
you need to
spell
do
out
it.
the initials, so for people who don't know what it is.
ISEAL. ISIL. So this is the Global Standards Organization for Standards. So that's the book of the books for standards. So I, as an ultimate geek, I go there and I check which are part of that.
But the problem is, for example, in situations like this, that may have, if you will, applicability theoretically, but not in reality. So the idea behind this first part of the conversation was really to kind of spell out the landscape of working with, quote, social media, quote, influencers, and the reverse, what should authors, people who are or are perceived to be influencers do in order to, if you will, protect themselves or before they embark on a relationship. We're going to move, because I'm very conscious of time and I try to be organized, so we're going to move into the second section of this conversation, which is effectively trying to look at corporate strategy for working with social media. So here I go back, Raluca, to you and to Kyle. What steps should, we'll call them, what one term we've used in our conversations, but is advertisers, but it may be sponsors, it may be entities with a vested interest in the material that's being posted. What steps should be taken to communicate correctly with audiences on social media?
So the first operative word that you use is correctly. So we'll definitely assume that you've done all of your focus groups and all of your marketing materials are sexy enough for your audience, targeting them precisely. Now it's the work that is the final validation before all of that gets put out. And that's an extremely important checkup system of the markets where you're putting your information out there, which is incredibly difficult, especially in an online world, right? You have some markets, you have your products or your communication that will cross all of those markets. You need to be aware of that. So for us, for example, within the diamond world, it's very, very important that the correct terminology is used, diamond terminology. You mentioned synthetic diamonds, laboratory-grown diamonds, Kyle, before. It's very important that any seller, merchandiser, or promoter of synthetic diamonds, laboratory-grown diamonds, they know the diamond terminology that is, one, approved, legislative in some areas, or guidelines such as the CIBJO Diamond Blue Books that apply for the jewelry world. you follow those, because that involves both correctness as well as clear disclosure. So that's the second element, I would say, disclosure. There is nothing worse than keeping information away from your customers, and the devil is in the details, so if they don't get it, then they'll still purchase the product. You can't risk this, and I promise you that is not going to be a returning customer. More than that, I think the industry should come as a whole and work on that together, because one error for one actor will have a massive negative impact on the entire industry, which is why I need to do this for the long term. We spoke a little bit earlier about diamond terminology and different countries. There is specific, and the EU market is absolutely special because you have legislation that goes across the European Union, but then also specific legislation in each country. There is a décret in France, and we were talking a little bit about the misunderstanding around the décret. This décret, it's a piece of French law, stands for the gemological world, pearls, a lot of metals are also covered in that. And it's a décret from 2002, very old. Now the Ministry of Economy have done a review of this décret, and they've considered that they don't want to change it. It's still accurate, and it's still clearly reflective of reality. Well, in the décret, we spoke about the diamond terminology, there is only one accepted term for manufactured diamonds, and that is synthetic diamonds. You can't use any other word, because in French, translated in French, they make no sense. The use of laboratory or reference to laboratoire for the French consumer, that means a gemological laboratory, which is absolutely not the idea that you would put forward. But I'd like to reiterate, that piece of law exists since 2002. It's not a new one. So everybody that activates in that world, and it applies in B2C as well as B2B environments, have been in place for a very long time. Now enforceability is definitely coming, so keeping such legislation in mind is crucial.
I think Marco wanted to jump in.
No, yeah, I had like a thought while you were speaking. I think that the idea, when you say what a company has to bear in mind when it deals with an influencers and vice versa, I mean, the main issue here is who control the process of communication. It's not an easy one, because sometimes a company likes that influencer, and the influencer is very jealous of the freedom of drafting and crafting their content. But obviously, these raises risks, because the company may be held liable for like what the influencer says and has been endorsed. So when you say what you have to bear in mind, it's very difficult to say it in general, because the dynamic here is who controls the process of communication. And this is like a side effect, because if the control is on the influencers, most of the liability will be there. If the control is on the company, obviously you probably have like the way you lead the way, but you have to take the responsibility for what you say. So this is how I see the relationship between an influencer and the company. It's a dynamic. It's like a dynamic of who controls the process of communication. And therefore, there are like issues that may be taken into consideration by companies. And for example, there are like common in practice, like morality clauses. You cannot like, you don't know, I mean, unfortunately, there is no it's not legally effective like indemnification, because reputation is harmed in a much faster way than any court may cure. And therefore, being able to breach a contract, to terminate a contract if there is like something that in the process of communication a company doesn't like, it doesn't fit the values of a company. It's important, but it must be there. And also, like there are privacy issues. Who control the data that in the process of communication? I mean, the dynamic of social platform allows a much better, much more intense engagement, and therefore there may be giveaways that the influencer do and the personal data may be gathered. Who control those data? So there are like many issues that must be taken care of, but they're all like, they can be reduced to this dynamic on who control the process. And it's not an easy, because I would say, I mean, as a lawyer, I would say if I have to advise a company, say, you control the process. But it's not always possible, because the content creator has its own its own ability, its own will to make their own contents, and that's the reason why they're successful. And so that make it like much more difficult than it seems, the relationship between a company and influencers.
It takes us back to Kyle's, I'll call Tiffany question, which is what happens even, for example, when the person who is creating the post, article, what have you, discovers material or perspectives that are not in line with what they, in the impression they had and the understanding they had of the material when they initially went into the arrangement. And I think the next section of this conversation will take us to, I saw a couple of flinches when the lab-grown topic came up, because one of the things that we have is language by country. And what we are going to do first in the sort of third section, again, I'm trained to be the school person, if you will, is the question of environmental claims. Oh. And Tiff, what is the current state of regulating, quote, green and environmental claims for the U.S. market? And more specifically, going to Raluca's point of French law and the laboratoire problem, what about U.S. nomenclature?
Sure. So this is a topic on everyone's mind, and one that is rapidly evolving in real time for sad but real reasons, right? The reality that we have in the US market is that there are not a lot of regulations around this. It's still really essentially the Wild West. Unless you're getting into fraud, you really don't have limits here. So there's lots of players out there making claims sort of all over the place. And that's been the case, and I think people have gotten complacent with that. This is the reason that we sort of came up with this whole panel and the title, because people used to reach for environmental claims and even action behind it as a sort of halo to show that they were doing good things, right? And then everyone just sort of started doing it because it doesn't really mean anything, so why not just sign on and get a few more customers, right? If you're a nefarious player, why not? We've seen as actual regulation is really starting to take shape now. So in the US at the moment, the Federal Trade Commission is rewriting their so-called green guides. That is what defines and regulates environmental claims for advertising across anything that touches the US market in all industries. So the JVC was really active in bringing industry together to put together our view at this first stage of what we want these changes to be, and will continue to be part of that process, which will likely stretch on for at least another year before we get final rules and a new reality for the US market of what green claims mean, will the word sustainable finally be defined, what will happen with carbon offsets, you know, what's to be with third-party certifications, will they be legitimized or not? So we're in this process of defining our reality. And what's interesting, I think, and that I really want to underline for you, particularly if you're affiliated with a large company or a company that has a lot of resources and a lot of reach, while we're forming these new regulations, what's happened is all the action right now in the US is in something called class action lawsuits, which I think is unique to the US, where a group of people can get together, a handful of people, thousands of people. A lawyer organizes them and brings a lawsuit on their behalf. So you can imagine if there's thousands of people, you can ask for lots of damages, lots of money. So this is happening all over the US right now for green claims, greenwashing. So there's been, and then, right, we're litigating this in different courts in different states. So then we're getting mixed messages.
One specific example, just so people can anchor their head around it.
I'll get to an example in just one minute. There are different examples in fashion. So H&M is one, and we're getting conflicting information. Some courts are saying this is okay. Courts in other states are saying this is okay, this is not okay. So we're getting, you can guess the states that California is going to probably say it's greenwashing, whereas in another state they might say, oh, it's fine, we don't care about ESG, right? This is our American problem, to say the least. So this is playing out right now, and I think if I were affiliated with a large company, I would really be watching what's going on with class action lawsuits and really identifying my own risk in any kind of advertising that I'm doing. The example that I'll point to that just came out last week out of the Southern District of New York is Danone Evian, right? So they had a carbon neutral claim on their water. And there's a class action lawsuit against them. They did do third-party certification. The court said that's not enough. The average consumer is not going to go look at 2 websites, figure out what this means. You put carbon neutral, you better be carbon neutral, and anybody knows you got to fly the water. Like, you're disqualified immediately. There's no way you could be carbon neutral. So that's kind of, for the US, that's kind of shocking and much more progressive than we've seen in the past. And so I think carbon offsets in general, it seems like any kind of carbon offset claim, these class action lawsuits are really coming for that, and we know that the FTC is also reconsidering carbon offsets as a valid environmental claim in general. So don't rely on carbon, the days of relying on carbon offsets are probably over, and you might even have liability for it going forward. So that would be the most relevant recent example.
You just actually brought me back to a question that I had when you started talking, which is about defining our current reality. Because isn't there a problem also that, language changes, so we constantly are redefining, if you will, our reality based on, if you will, updating definitions, and one of your problems of 2002 and updating regulation. So my next question, Raluca, is for you. So you used a term in our conversations that we are all dying to know more of. So from greenwashing to green hushing, how can we avoid this transition? What is the differentiation between greenwashing and green hushing? And what is the definition of green hushing?
So green hushing is the moment in which you realize that all the efforts that you actually do and all the work that you actually do don't end up being communicated. You're too afraid to actually show the things that you're doing. One, because you might have been attacked online. We all know our friendly trolls online that can challenge a lot of your claims. Well, if many of them jump on you or they jump on your influencers, your collaborators, they will back off, they will be scared, and they will go towards green hushing. For me, green hushing is incredibly dangerous because I absolutely hate race to the bottom. I hate people saying, oh, but that guy is doing a bad job and that guy is doing a horrible job. No, my friend. I want you to tell me how you're doing the best possible job for your organization, for your product, with your resources. So I think we need to really fight against green hushing. It's 100% possible that you communicate your real impact, you show how you walk the talk without falling in the trap of greenwashing. And that's being done by actually having sources to back up any possible claim you're making out there. It needs to be verified, it needs to be communicated. And to Tiffany's point, exactly what you're seeing in the United States is what's happening across the EU, and I would add the friendly country of the United Kingdom, exactly following the same principle. Carbon neutral, net zero claims are understood by consumers globally as an organization that has no impact or even does amazing things for the environment. But when they are told that that tag is actually given to an organization that does 90% of their activity offsetting in the best case scenario, they get totally disappointed. That can't hold water any longer. UK already has legislation in this respect, both from a capital and markets authority as well as from an advertising standpoint. And now a lot of these agencies actually started applying it. So the application, the enforcement of this legislation needs to take place, because otherwise, again, the companies that are doing a great job aren't rewarded. It's the guys that are doing the bad job that are getting away with it, and that you definitely don't want. And in the EU, absolutely fresh off the print, last week in Strasbourg, the European Parliament has approved the Empowering Consumers Directive. This is a directive that sets the ban on general environmental claims. This is totally done for consumers so that they know that when they're looking at a product, they will feel confident in the tag that they see. Because honestly, our consumers have heard so much about each and every company being sustainable, but actually they don't when you look into the nitty-gritty details. So that sets the standard on the claims that you need to make. So no more sustainable company X, and that only covers a small part of their business. You actually need to integrate that for your business. And whilst, of course, you have the bigger players that will always be the first ones to be looked at, Marco mentioned social media. On social media, you can become viral if you have a marketing budget of 10K a year. And that is going to be much stronger for the consumers than a large company with a huge, huge marketing capital. Which means also the smaller players need to be aware that everything that they're communicating has equal power online as any company they might admire from this budget perspective. So I'd say for every company, make sure you can verify your claims, have proper certification. We were talking about certificates. Responsible Jewellery Council is there for the industry to help them set absolutely all of these standards in the right place and be comfortable with it and understand that you're covered by a great system. And don't overpromise. Do the right thing, what's core to you, your values. The more you try, the less convincing you're going to be. So it's possible for us to do the great thing, because the jewelry world has done that for so many years now. So you just need to be proud of it. And also, also have access to good sources. Shameless promo of our Diamond Facts, it's out there for everyone using external sources. Don't take our word for it, take other sources, and make sure that you feel confident enough to stand for the great work that has been done in this industry.
Kyle, do you have an unuttered thought?
I do. I believe that there's a disconnect in the fashion media and in the luxury media, because there's a failure to report on all of these things that you're talking about. And actually, I think that consumers are so confused now that there needs to be more of a commitment on the part of editors, content producers, content creators, to interview you people and to cover you people. And I mean, there are some people like me who cover these issues. I write for Forbes.com. But, you know, if the media won't commit, if the media owners and global people, and even these like global holding companies like Kering Group or Richemont or whomever, you know, they need to be hiring writers and journalists to talk about this. I mean, they're not communicating it to the public. That's my thought.
Much appreciated. So in
Come to us, we'll
responding to
help
that
you.
thought, I wanted to ask Raluca and Tiff, what legislative initiatives are coming our way that the companies that are hiring and those that are writing and influencing should be aware of with regard to the so-called green space? I'm just gonna, I hate that shorthand, but I'm gonna use it.
I'll jump in because I think you have more to say. FTC is doing green guides, and then if you're concerned, if you're in the U.S. market, I would just put like almost all your attention on California, because they are leading the way, and the U.S. Federal government usually follows them, and you're going to have your most restrictive environment in California, as well as maybe one of your biggest, if not your biggest, consumer market. So there's lots of, like, if we're talking about just legislation being done at the state level there that's leading the way for the U.S., but our friends across the Atlantic have a lot more going on that we're trying to catch up to. So if you want to.
And you know what I was thinking? It doesn't happen very often that cross-Atlantic legislation is aligned so nicely and so timely. So it definitely clearly shows that there is a need out there. So I mentioned the Empowering Consumers Directive, which was just adopted. And you also have very much connected to that one is the Green Claims Directive. So the Green Claims Directive comes to support the Empowering Consumers Directive within the European Union, and it absolutely looks at all of the information that you need to gather to use to back up your claims. So that's really spot on, a clear explanation of all the information that you need to gather and what you need to basically put out there. There definitely watch this space, and I would say use organizations such as JVC to support you to navigate that, because again, a lot of you communicate online, which means you will get into various other areas and markets. Whilst governments are putting a lot of great information out there, use the organizations that you already have within the industry to support you in this process.
So there's a natural transition here, if you will, from talking about greenwashing, green hushing, issues related to the much abused, quote unquote, sustainability category to intellectual property, because it is arguably a dimension of natural resource, although intangible, that needs to be protected. So we need to broaden that definition and protect it. And what I wanted to, in this section, specifically do, trying to leave some time for Q&A, I'm very mindful of the clock that's so conveniently placed there. Marco, we would love you to talk a bit about Diet Prada. In doing my research prior to embarking on this, I came upon the following quote: Diet Prada is, quote, the front row's most feared Instagram account, which turned its relatively unknown founders into two of fashion's most powerful voices, moral arbiters in an industry not historically known for its conscience. What would you tell us about Diet Prada, which was a phenomenon? It's just the sort of power and presence is phenomenal, and you've obviously had close engagement with them, and so I wonder what your thoughts are.
I think that what Kyle said and other Instagrammer may have like an important role in developing an awareness of what are the important topic for consumers, for the market.
And important evidence.
Yeah.
It's about giving the followers and the readers facts and evidence, not opinions.
Exactly. And this is like the approach that it's an approach that has like value and but may have like economic consequences, very, very important economic consequences, and therefore must be carried out with the right attention and in a very neutral way and in a very aware way. So what Kyle said, and leave the audience the opportunity to understand and to form an opinion, and that's important. And the danger we have with the social platform is that the dialogue, the conversation cannot be, it often is not thoughtful, it is immediate, and therefore it's important. And obviously Instagrammer and company must be aware that behind the message, behind the curtain, there are people that work every day to create a model, and it must be appreciated for what it is. And therefore, I think what they did, but they're not. They are developing a much greater awareness of how the message must be put forward, and a critical message. Obviously, the creativity process is something that must be protected and incentivized. It should be new. It shouldn't. It should so. There is this new approach that must be incentivized, and what Kyle did also. I mean, it's the right approach. That's what I think.
So, Kyle, what I would like to do now is use technology, going back to session 1, and bring up some images that are prominent cases involving jewelry designers who successfully defended their copyrights, so that you can perhaps discuss the ways that this was achieved. And hopefully this is going to work.
I'm ready. Oh, cool. Right, so here's what I referred to previously. On the left, you've got these earrings, that original one-of-a-kind design by Daniela Villegas. And as I explained, they sold a couple years ago for approximately, 20,000 euros. Okay, that's the first part of the facts. Second part, a couple years later, these were,
Just tell me when to go.
how shall I put it? These Home Shopping Network brought out a pair of earrings that looks rather similar. But note that I don't make any accusations. I just say, can you just look at these images and tell me what you think? Do you see similarities between these? And
Just look, a little bit of fact 2 is obscured, but there's fact 1,
yeah,
fact 2.
facts part 1 and then facts part 2. But the thing that was so fun about this is that, like 1,700 people liked it. And then I told people, go ahead, Lisa, please. And then I said, and I also tagged another jewelry reporter, Third Coast Gems. We like to report on brands, and we like to support independent design. So I said, hey, to help support Daniela Villegas and her earrings, do you want to copy and paste this comment? I believe in respecting and protecting jewelry designers' copyrights. And send it to HSN. And so, the next day, those earrings had been removed from the website. So that was a pretty good response. 102 comments. Oh, this is a really classic one. This is another one involving Home Shopping Network. Okay, so Hannah Bernhard, as some of you may know, is a super skilled. They make handmade high luxury jewelry with Swarovski crystals, and they hand set everything, and they make everything's handmade. Okay, they don't have anything made in a factory. So this is a brooch that they actually sold to someone who then sold it to the woman, Iris Apfel, who's a sort of geriatric starlet. and she had a line of jewels.
Works for HSN as well.
Yeah, and she had a line of jewels that she brought out with HSN. And when they did a press preview, I got it, because, they send me the press previews whenever they have new jewelry. And I thought, gee, that's kind of funny. That looks a lot like the brooch. And if you can go ahead, that Hannah Bernhard made. And do you have the photo of Iris Apfel?
Pardon?
Because there's even a photo online of Iris Apfel wearing the original.
If we
Oh,
have
okay,
that.
so we don't have it. But so there was this it was all over the internet. I wasn't the only person talking about this when it happened. There were all of these fantastic, brand advocates who were saying, like, what is this? You know, so again, it got taken off the website
And
within 48 hours.
one of the ironies here is if I tell you something about Iris Apfel, you will know immediately who she is. She is a very distinguished-looking, shall we say, older woman with close-cropped hair and ovoid, thick-rimmed glasses. So she's a bit like Edna. She herself has become her own parody. And so you have a situation almost where one, if you will, advocate was able to rein in another person who is functioning in many ways as that kind of influencer.
Can I say something really briefly?
Sure.
Okay, I think this is really fascinating, and I wonder what Marco thinks too. This is really fascinating because on the issue of copyright, number one, it's like impossible to get a copyright of a jewelry design. Let's call it misogyny, let's call it government bureaucracy. They haven't, no, seriously though, the USPTO has not granted a jewelry copyright since like 2017. So getting your design really protected is going to be difficult. Secondly, the idea of a toucan is probably not copyrightable. You know, like, okay, it looks like the original, but there's like there's real toucans out there. There's tons of toucan jewelry, I'm sure. So the fact that you're playing in this space that's between some of the limitations and the legal black and white, and yet also not violating anything yourself by doing this advocacy and HSN being responsive, I just find it really fascinating. I didn't know about this
And
before.
by the way, I'm aware of everything that you said. Like you can't copyright like a rose or all of these motifs that are so popular in every economic level of the jewelry market, right? From fast fashion all the way up to Chanel,
Gosh.
High jewelry, right? So, but still, the fact is that there were photos all over the
Image,
internet.
Whoever is the techno god, thank you.
Oh wait, yeah, and this is a good one, the malachite one. This is great.
I'm working.
I can't wait to tell that story. Okay, is it not? What a pity. It froze.
It's coming.
Oh, okay, great. Pray to
Do
the,
something. He's
pray to
doing
the
something.
jewelry gods. Okay, next. Okay, so there's a designer, a heritage design brand called Tony Duquette, based in Beverly Hills, California. The founder was Tony Duquette. Hutton Wilkinson is now the designer and creative director of that company. So he makes jewelry, a lot of it sells. That's a malachite and tourmaline and emerald bracelet. It sells probably for, I don't know, $300,000. And he walks into a store one day that shall remain nameless, and he sees Lycra swimsuits imprinted with, this is a photo from one of his books, okay? And the photo of his jewelry is like all over these designer Italian Lycra swimsuits, and he's like, his head explodes. So he did not have the money to hire a lawyer, so what he did is he got an attorney on a contingency basis to say, like, do something about this, because I have clients all over the world who have paid, six figures for my jewels, and now they're on Lycra swimsuits. The photos from my book of the jewels that they own. So this attorney totally succeeded. He got a huge financial compensation, but because part of the deal was he had to sign an NDA, he can't say who it was, I can't say who it was. But, and that has happened to him not once, but it happened again to him. Because his jewelry, a lot of people think it looks really great and they want to use it on their clothes. And the second time it happened, it was on somebody's dresses. And it was a global brand, by the way, who shall remain nameless.
Well, it works, aesthetically, it works very well with the zeitgeist right now, so it's not surprising.
Yeah, but so that's an interesting thing just for you attorneys, is that there's plenty of attorneys who are like, okay, I'll take this on a contingency basis because they feel like they can win, you know, and they do.
So you too, as a jewelry and fashion attorney, can now take out a billboard as we have them in the United States. I'm embarrassed to say, but it's sort of 1-800 and then letter numbers that spell
Jewelry
out
law.
some letter, and you basically have what are called ambulance chasers. But I mean, here we could have, if you will, rip-off chasers, and
Jewelry lawyers.
so potentially that's a new area of how one balances the gravitas of excellence with that image. I'm not sure, but we could probably work it out. Now, it is 1:55. Oh gosh, if anybody has any questions, please do ask them. If you want to go eat, which is absolutely one of our basic rights, or hopefully it is a right, we're all around today, and everybody here is accessible via hashtag, via email. We'll give you, I, for one, would be happy to give you my cell phone. Please, let's continue this conversation, because we have only just begun. And with all these issues related to AI and the whole idea that we're going to outfit virtual avatars and create $7 million parures for them that, no one's even going to wear, there is regrettably, in this respect, nowhere to go but up. And at the same time, you have to manage what seems to be a kind of ridiculous pursuit with the gravitas that is required. And I, for one, would say that jewelry is more than just an adornment. So there's a lot more at stake here. And so we invite you to join this conversation, and we will strive to find a way to have a part 2.
Absolutely. Lisa, if I may just add
Sure, please,
just one element on like guidelines, and what Kyle also showed here is also the power of a community standing together for elements of value and importance. So we have, and I'd say a similar thing also going on within CIBJO right now. So for the green mapping of where is it that we need to stand as an industry from a nomenclature perspective to what are the steps and development of where we're going and the strategy. We have John here that is leading fantastic work within the world of sustainability committee within CIBJO. There is also a lot of other roadmaps that have been created, but you asked me for a space to kind of watch out for. So I think everybody that is in the jewelry industry world should also look into the guidelines of our own CIBJO, because that does create the level playing field across the world, and that's not an easy task. So I just encourage this unity from such a perspective as well.
And just as a pendant to that comment, I will say that we are working hard to make CIBJO also better recognized, if you will, in the United States as the sort of standard bearer that it is. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us, and see you next time.
Thank you so much.
We'd like to thank everybody, and just on that note, tomorrow in the Palladio Theatre, so it's going to be in the bigger hall, we've got 3 seminars which are going to deal with some of the issues that were raised today, particularly the ones related to greenwashing and sustainability, and more specifically also to nomenclature which can be used reasonably, and work that's being done in CIBJO by Ferial Zarouki over there. And we'll end off tomorrow with a look at big data and analysis in making business decisions in the diamond industry, with the gentleman sitting back over there. It should be fantastic, and we'd love to see you all there. Sorry for holding you from your lunch.
Oh,
Bon appetit.
Perfect timing. Thank you.